So, hello everybody, and welcome back to a special part 2 of episode number 4 of the Cosmic History Codes that myself, Davyd Farrell, and my teacher and guide, Leslie Shankman from the Stellar Nations Pathway, put out just a few days ago. Now, this is a sort of an addendum, really, that's kind of got triggered in a positive way by watching a recent astrological video put out by our peer Molly McCord. So dibs to Molly for a great piece that she did around this. It was actually on the eclipse, but what we're going to be looking at today is something that really happens just a couple of days afterwards, but is already really in motion, we can say, which is Mars in Pisces. Now, Mars in Pisces is a little bit of a strange energy, a bit like Saturn in Pisces. It doesn't necessarily feel completely at home because it's very fiery and it's in water, but it also allows its more chameleon sense of development to come forth. And when I put this over to Leslie and we started talking about it, we saw that there was indeed, as Molly had identified, a separate track running in parallel to all of the action going on in Aries. So I'm kind of setting this up a little bit, Leslie, but where would you like to sort of lead into this from your perspective as a sort of a preface to what you're going to share today?
Well, I did slides again, and when my attention went to Saturn in Pisces and Mars in Pisces together, and I saw the stars on them, my heart literally melted. And I'm like, oh gosh, we have to talk about this. It is a beautiful thing that's really brings more meaning and now for the eclipse today, but also going forward, because you and I know what's going to happen going forward. We'll make more shows on it. But as far as what the stellar rays are going to be showing us through these planets, so
Right.
yeah.
I mean, this is the thing with stellar nations and, in general, but also the cosmic history codes. And we started off doing the shows a little further apart, but as the whole piece that we're in is accelerating and as we're looking into the crystal ball of the astrology as it's unfolding in the coming months, it's very clear to, I think, both of us certainly, that there are multiple stories playing out here that are all conjoined, of course they are, down here in the 3D. And of course, the micro and the macro, the fractal nature of our universe suggests that what is going on, and it seems to have already happened in the past and is going to happen in the future, is already all happening here too. So we don't necessarily need to take strong plant medicine to understand this, but it does help sometimes. But what we do have is a wonderful narrator here in Leslie who's going to unpack the story. And I have to say, this really caught my eye due to my own Antares code and the fact that a lot of this action is happening around my ascendant. So this is very, very personal for me. And this is where I really have to thank Leslie and people like Molly for helping me to make sense of what I'm experiencing. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the narrating expert here in the house, which is Leslie. And Leslie's going to take us through some slides and we're going to try and make this make sense, I guess, in parallel to what we already shared on previous part 1 of the Cosmic History Codes a few days ago. And of course, we have our great felines in the house too. Leslie has her black
I put my
panther.
cat out. She got back in. I'm so sorry. If I don't let her in, she'll be pounding against the door, making background noise.
Well, I mean, be thankful. I've got a bird dive bombing the window outside right now, who seems hell
Oh
bent
yes,
through the
that
glass.
happens
He's
in
done
the
it
spring.
twice, so I don't know. I hope he's okay and not having some kind of weird moment. But
Well,
anyway,
they do that. The males get territorial, see their reflection, and think they're attacking someone else. We've had one for years.
well, hopefully that's not too symbolic of anything that's going to come out in this
Well, actually,
conversation.
it is kind of pertinent to today's discussion. So let's get into
Well,
that.
I'll let you take it away.
Okay, I'll get the slideshow. Just a second. All right, starting the slides. And just a teeny recap in case you're dropping into this for the very first time. Davyd and I have been talking about our cosmic history as shown to us by Stellar Nations, stellarnations.com. There's a number of books, but specifically, a lot of this is mapped in these books that you're seeing in front of you. It's the mapping of over 250 stars among 13 stellar nations, which are really like parts of ourselves. And the stars we can understand are sentient. Our soul particles live on the stars. We have different aspects of our soul in different stars within different stellar nations. And we can say that those stars are like the cells in our light body. So we'll see that continue to unravel. As far as what I'm saying, it becomes pertinent because what we're really learning is we live in our light bodies as well as our physical bodies. And we really live within a very vastly immense organism that has consciousness and order. And when we do recognize the stellar rays within ourselves, we can expand our planetary consciousness, our Earth consciousness, towards a stellar consciousness. And that's how we can recode our collective consciousness, which is what we're trying to do. So through the few shows we've done, we've been setting up some of our cosmic history, and I don't want to repeat it all, but especially the last one, part 1, we really went into our cosmic history. So the premise for this one, just to know if you're just dropping into this, is that our sun is an angel star that is an 8th Pleiadian star, 7 sisters of the Pleiades, Atlas and Pleione being parents. And at another Aquarian age, when our sun was more akin to being an adolescent type being, he looked at his father, Atlas, and he was being trained for a fate, his divine destiny, similar to Atlas. And he thought it was the most boring thing in the world. He thought Atlas just stood there. And he basically said, I'm not willing to sacrifice all for this service. And in that impetuous kind of teenage fiery way, kept roiling and fell out of his orbit. He left the Pleiades. He was actually thrilled at first, but he was a 6th-dimensional consciousness who went very quickly to a 4th and became very closed down. Long story short, we did the long story the last time. Our sun eventually, when he came into the light of a photon belt at a further age, was reached by the voices of his family calling out to him, wanted to get back on track, and was given grace, essentially, the opportunity to recreate his fate by creating the Milky Way galaxy. So, as I said, he saw his father Atlas, and I'm going to say when he created the Milky Way galaxy, each one of the planets is really an aspect either of his Pleiadian family or his own psyche. And essentially, this is all reflective of us as beings, as above, so below. But also, as I said, we have soul particles on different stars. Well, the sun is our central star. We all have soul particles on our sun. We're on this journey that I'm talking about. At any rate, Atlas was really trying to teach, or his son, which later our son, so his name is Solana, saw as Saturn. He said, look, I'm the seed of life. I'm the stability. I'm the foundation upon which worlds are built, and I can be built upon. I can be relied upon. I'm a source of protection. It's not a staid thing, just standing there. This is like literally talking about how do you be a gear in the process of creation, which is constantly renewing and moving. And so really this role, this matured role, is to be a gear of evolution, a gear of ongoing life, not to stand there in a box. So why I melted when Davyd mentioned this and had me listen to Molly what is her name? McCord?
Molly McCord, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I'm very attenuated now to seeing or feeling through stellar consciousness, because I've been really feeling close to it since 2013, and it's a gradual process to literally embody it. But when you do, you can feel things in a certain way. And I suddenly looked at the spiritual or energetic dynamics between Saturn and Mars, or let's say between Atlas and Solana, and saw, oh my gosh, we've got several layers of dynamics going here. We've got father and son coming together. We've got Saturn or Atlas as kind of a dharma, like what's our purpose in life? Or we could call it divine destiny. Divine destiny is really what Mars, as perhaps let's call it ego, pushed against to get to know himself, of course. What is divine destiny? Sometimes it's called divine will. I know when I hear it as divine will, even myself, I kind of contract. Don't tell me what to do. But it's actually what we chose. It's the highest intention of the light inside of us. We had the option at the beginning of our becoming a separate consciousness to decide what we resonated with, and that became our divine destiny. And we keep that in mind because I'm going to show you something on a stellar level that's happening that relates to this a little later. But I also saw Saturn is, or Mars or Atlas rather, I'm sorry. It's really like showing us what is a balanced way of carrying yang energy. And looking at Mars as kind of sun, ego in a learning process. And I should say, okay, Mars is representing Solana because Solana in his own mind, he dreamed himself up as Mars was a piece of his psyche, like, hey man, I can do things, I got the verve, I can do it, I can conquer, I'm gonna see, I'm gonna make things happen. Which is fine, but really still learning to balance the yang energy. And why that's really pertinent, this really goes hand in hand with what we did a few days ago when we talked about the cosmic history, because we saw that in our Milky Way galaxy, we've been in constant war on the galactic level. And we've also, well, almost right away in the beginning, pushed out the feminine. There was a big betrayal between the Dragon Nation and the great felines. The goddess was pushed out of the Milky Way galaxy, and our galaxy tilted yang. There was further breaches to the feminine, really bad breaches through the star Electra in the Pleiades. Then our sun had actually first established a planet that was being a co-creator with him for our galaxy called Tiamat. Beautiful feminine yin planet representing his Pleiadian sisters, representing his mother, helped him actually co-create the planets in the Milky Way galaxy, but she was also destroyed. So we have, as we know, we've been living without our feminine self, or this balance between feminine, masculine, or the true balance really between yin and yang, all this time for this creation cycle. And we talked about last time how we're moving into a time of a cosmic rearrangement, a new creation cycle. So what melted my heart here is to think of these levels of kind of energetic dynamics between Saturn and Mars, which on the 8th, we're going to see they're a little bit apart, but they share 2 stars. And in Davyd, you said in 2 days, they're going to come to the same degree. So, but here they are, they're like getting together. This is a sub-theme, because my premise in talking about these Cazimis since Pluto Cazimi with Davyd has been, oh my gosh, I feel like our sun Solana is adulting. Like we're coming into a new Aquarian age, and he's literally going through the pieces of his psyche sort of to look at what he needs to look at to bring up the shadows, to integrate them so that in this new Aquarian age, he can take on his true fate. So here we've got Saturn at 1426 of Pisces. This is on the 8th, and Mars at 1259. But I think on the 10th they come together.
Yeah, so let me just give a couple of the specifics there, Leslie, just to bring it into the slightly bigger picture. So, yeah, this is on the 8th, which is when we have the eclipse and the Chiron Cazimi. But then really and truly the piece, I kind of feel like it's a bit like a staggered race start. That the sort of the race, I'm using this as an analogy, starts on the eclipse, but and there's a second like sort of start that happens almost staggered when Mars conjunct Saturn on the 10th at exactly 1440 of Pisces. That's where they come together. And it's like, yeah, I mean, we're already in the energy of that as recording, as we are in the energy of everything that's going on the 8th. And we're recording this piece on the 9th, the day before. So it's all very much in process as you know, as we're talking basically. But I always feel that, as Worman tells me, that it's not exact until it's exact. And when it's exact, that's when something happens. And, you know, we're also talking about this in relation to the length of the eclipse. Some people are saying it's 4 minutes and 28, and some are saying it's 4 minutes and 29.1. Well, you'd say, well, 1.1 second. Is that correct? I think for
No, no,
420.
I was told that the mainstream media is saying 4 minutes and 27 seconds when
That's it. Yeah.
supposedly in actuality it's 4 minutes 28.1 seconds,
1.
and that the
Right.
extra second matter, like you said, with Wormwood, take it to its completion.
Exactly. And I think that that's an important motif, and it's not necessarily specific just to what we're talking about here, but I've seen over and over again, particularly when working with Black Moon Lilith and the flashpoints, when the true and the mean come together, that it's really often only for a very brief, like flash, like maybe 20, 30 seconds. And so you can, with quantum awareness, preset what's going to happen. But if you really want to do it in the moment, you have to do it in the moment. And I've seen so many times working with Mayan time that the culmination of the piece doesn't happen until right at the end. And often I've seen it with Worms, like, I feel like this isn't coming to pass, isn't coming to pass. He's like, no, 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 it's not the end yet. It's not the end. Ah, now it's the end. And it's often right at the end that something comes to fruition. A bit like a full moon, for example. Like if I do some journey work on a full moon, I don't get the full illumination if I do the journey an hour to 3 hours beforehand. Even though we're in the actual energy of the full moon, it's not until the full moon hits that I suddenly get the illumination in the astrals of like, ah, this is how the new moon prayers are going to come to fruition. This is what the narrative is being directed by. So I'm just adding that in because I think precision is incredibly important in astrology, and sometimes it gets a little bit overlooked. But to all intents and purposes, we are already in this process, and I think that that's also worth remembering. So we can start working with this energy the moment that we start to receive it into our energy fields.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And I will also say, in looking at the stellar aspects, we are looking, they're coming through an astrological radix. It's
Right.
not, we're not looking at astrology per se. We're using this as pivot points and gear switching, but we're looking
Yeah.
at the backlight information, like
Right.
what's the information in these stars coming through. So yeah, it needs to be precise, but on the other hand, we're also looking at something slightly different than just the straight astrology.
That's very true. That is very true. It's a bit like having a theatre backdrop, right? And then we can say that the cosmic history codes are a bit like the theatre backdrop, but then we've got the players on the stage who have to do their acting in the precise moment. Otherwise, the story doesn't hang together. And the two have to work harmoniously. If you have the wrong
Right,
backdrop with the wrong actors at the wrong moment, the whole thing's just a mess and doesn't make sense,
right,
which, of
right.
course, is where the beautiful synchronicity and resonance and harmonization of all of this, the more you settle into it and the more you take your eagle's perch and perceive it, the more mind-blowingly magical it all is. And I think that we're coming to a place maybe with this eclipse where everything is going to come to a very, very synchronized, I would say, compression point or a still point or something, which only happens in that 4 minutes and 28.1 seconds. But the effects of that are going to probably ripple through all of our awareness and our world probably for a very long time to come. Or maybe we're all just going to disappear and end up on another planet. Who knows? We'll see, but hopefully we'll still be here to finish off our ongoing narration in the coming weeks. But please continue, Leslie. Where are we up to now in the story?
Well, given that we're talking about tomorrow and we have this little tete-a-tete going with the father and son when
Right.
all this activity is happening, and they're like coming together. They're two different energies, but not really. I mean, there's the love, and it's well, I'll tell you what, I had a voice come in my head when I first looked at it and it said, this is a kumbaya moment. And I'm like, I never use that word. What is that? I mean, I know what it is. It's an old gospel spiritual for slavery. I know it's been used in an urban way as a derogative term, but I actually was, what's the word? Led. I mean, I felt compelled to look it up. Kumbaya is 3 Hebrew words, and it means arise, the coming of the eternal God. And I'm like, oh, okay. So something in my inner voice imparted this meaning just in a feeling sense to
Mm-hmm.
this little side vignette happening over here. And so I'll try to, if I tell you a little bit about these stars, it may awaken that feeling in you. So you'll notice that what we see here is the stellar nation or soul family that the stars are coming through, the energies coming through on the star. So each one kind of has a mission. The male serpents is a part of us or a part of creation that they're teachers of the rays of knowledge from the divine mind. And the whole idea in the male serpents is as you gain more and more knowledge about the beauty of creation, it's like you're climbing a ladder back to understanding what God is. The female serpents actually are Siamese twins with the male serpents. Oops, sorry. They just a second, got to get my slide to go back.
Don't worry.
Okay. Female serpents are meant to be completely complementary. Hasn't happened yet on the earth plane, but they're healers and they're understanding the use of tantra sexually and otherwise, in the sense that how do we take our physical body and meld it really with the mind of God? Like, how do we make the spiritual force come through us? So at the highest, the male and female serpents are just, it's like a Helios Gamos relationship. That's what it's meant to be. And then the bird nation is really the aspect of ourselves. We were given the bird nation as humans as a gift, really. They reflect our consciousness to us through the stars, and also it's where the co-creators that have helped us set up the planets, the fairies, the elves, the devas, are part of the bird nation. But basically, the whole idea of the bird nation is our body is the earth, and the earth is our bodies. There's no separations.
Right.
So let's look first at, in the sky, there's this whole river of stars called the Eridanus River. This is a big pathway for male serpent initiations into higher levels of knowledge. And the final initiation is Achemar, and that's what's on both the sun and on Mars, excuse me, on Mars and on Saturn. So we'll talk about what is Achemar.
Sorry,
Achemar,
Leslie, if I can just interject there. I mean, it's very interesting that, of course, Mars and Saturn have these very yang masculine energies, and they're often considered as the malefics, right, in astrology, which I think is a little harsh. I don't really think there are any malefics, to be honest. It's just perspectives. And it makes sense to me that now maybe if Mars and Daddy can sort out their issues with each other, which I think is an interesting kind of aspect to it too, that there is the possibility then to go on this pathway, right, with Achemar too, a much more evolved understanding of the masculine energy, where even father and son issues, the youth and the mature adults have got their energies aligned. Does that make sense?
well, it's totally makes sense, because that's really what I walked away from after my heart melted and I looked at it more. I'm like, oh my God, this whole coming period, also knowing what's coming with the Jupiter Cazimi, it's like the reformation, the growing up of the masculine aspect, the healing of the masculine aspect. Because I also know that cosmically, the feminine has been very healed and is sort of on its way back in to get that healing has to get integrated on the earth plane. But cosmically, it's kind of accomplished. Cosmically, we're still seeing, oh, there's a little bit that has to happen with male healing, so that when this, and that's partly how the integration will work on Earth. I mean, if we can get the cosmic healing of both, and then start to feel it, maybe that's part of the input somehow of the eclipse tomorrow, and the whole idea of a reset. If we could start to feel it and start to integrate a new understanding of masculine, feminine within ourselves and among each other. But really, when you think about the fact that our galaxy has been running on a yang expression, which we could call very patriarchal, for aeons and aeons and aeons, the male doesn't even know itself, the truth of what is, who am I really, right? So there's this time in Pisces of, and I know the stars coming up, we've talked about this. There's sort of a real, let's start here with Achemar. We're just going to talk about a few today, but there's a real
Yeah.
healing path. So when Mars comes back into Aries, the first thing that happens is pretty interesting. We'll get to that in another show, but it really tracks with this idea of, okay, this whole idea of being masculine is being revisited. There's a chance for healing on it.
Right.
So the placement where Achemar is on our code, but now we're looking at just the collective code for the day for what's happening on our globe on Earth, happens to be on Saturn and Mars, shows us where the initiation awaits, right? Because Achemar is the final initiation of the male serpents. And this initiation, which happens after many others that have happened, it's analogous to the initiation that we've heard about in Egypt, where the adept is put in the sarcophagus and the lid is closed. And if they don't know how to pierce the darkness with their own light, they can die. But what that means, if we really think about it, because we talked a lot in the other aspect, the first part of the show, about how we're learning the light by the shadow. This is about learning to integrate our shadow and also to feel our light enough so that our light just becomes what we are. We finally know it and trust it. And that's when we enter the true knowledge. And the true knowledge is a state of awareness in being. So that's the level of initiation we're talking about here for these two planetary bodies, or if you will, representations of the masculine.
Wow. I mean, it's really interesting, Leslie. I'm just, obviously having worked with you for a while and done a lot of stuff now in the Stellations over the last year. We even did the Return of the Goddess journey last year, and it was clear at that time that the fragmentation of Tiamat of the Goddess was needing and wanting to come back. And I'm starting to see now that the healing of the masculine can't really happen until the reorganization, and we can say, I don't know what the opposite of fragmentation is, but the reconsolidation of the goddess energy it is already happened, is happening here on the planet. And as a consequence, that's going to allow the masculine to heal itself of its own wounds. And as we know from some of the fall of the great Khan and the dragon, is that the masculine warriors followed blindly their leader down this path of power lust, really, because particularly dragons, that's what they were sort of hardwired to do. And it was only at the final moment that they realized that they'd been betrayed, really, by their great leader. And I think that in many ways, if we look at the world we live in as a male, I can say that we've been completely betrayed by the masculine leaders in our world. And they put it on us that somehow the masculine are the bad guys. And it's like we have this complete emasculation that's happened of the masculine or the male beings in our world over the last 20 years or so. And I can understand why that's happened, but it's still out of balance. And I'm kind of seeing that this kind of jigsaw puzzle is that both masculine and feminine have been wounded. And there isn't sort of, hey, you did this to me and I did this to you. And that's an old paradigm, really, argument that I think is going to dissolve now when we understand it's like, wow, we sort of got betrayed by these beings a long time ago, and we fell with them into this chaos and madness that they created. And now we're trying to pick our way back out as sovereign beings and saying, hey, well, if the goddess is coming back to herself, this is allowing Mars and Saturn and the masculine to say, okay, now that that's sort of sorted, maybe we can go on our healing journey now, and we can look at what are the woundings are that have happened to us and how we've been betrayed by our so-called leaders who are very misogynistic, patriarchal, etc., etc.
Yes, I totally agree with that. The only thing I'd say is be a little careful about it's still easy for us to get into us and them language.
I know. I'm just kind of, we're all
Well,
one, but
it's important to realize we're a whole, right? And yes, this is a very malevolent force, and we can be pretty mad about it. But it's really us. It's the aspects of us. It's what we look like if we don't want it, if we're afraid to take initiation, or go into renewal, which is going to be our next star, actually. Because
right.
when you don't stay with the organic initiations where you kind of let yourself die and be reborn, you don't stay fully functional. You become more and more cyborg machine, like whatever. You have to steal energy. Your you can't get really beyond the fourth dimension, you become, kind of putrid. But that's actually, it's like, if we go back to we're also on Bait and Kados, which is the chamber of mirrors, like, look what's happening. It's like, we're also being asked to look at, oh my God, if I don't take initiation, this is what happens. And it's almost like, I mean, it's such a tenuous road, because we can't go like, oh, I'm going to say we can't go get out of here because of part of ourselves, but that's not true, because we are allowed to. The eighth initiation of the dragon, and in fact, this is going to come up in the Jupiter Cazimi with Algol. The higher aspect of Algol is the right use of ruthlessness. And there is a time for our warrior being to cut out of creation that which is destroying too much. So that's coming. But
Yeah. I mean,
and
thank you for that clarification, Leslie, because you're absolutely right. And the initiations are important. And perhaps it's more that in the world we live in, the initiations have been taken from us. If you go into indigenous communities, particularly in Africa, they still have these key initiations at points, I think it's around 12 or 13, where you get initiated into being an adult, into being a warrior, actually. And if you don't take that initiation, like we haven't had in Western culture, we sort of tumble or fall into other distractions and pathways that are really being guided by these other beings. So we've missed the chance of the initiation. And I think that's perhaps the part, if we want to be angry about anything, it should be that. It's just like, hey, you took my right to initiation away from me, because I didn't even know that I should have had that.
yeah.
And of course, in the end, our soul or our higher self will always direct us to what we need, which is where something like Stellar Nations comes in to remind us, like, hey, you still have an initiation to do. And maybe the initiation is to see these beings that we feel hold sway over us and say, I no longer consent to be a part of your narrative. And that is the initiation, to step away from that and say, I need to step outside of your hegemony or your system or your structure.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And also, it's interesting that so what you're saying is we can be mad about the patriarchy because it gave us a structure that left out half of us, and it left out
Right.
this understanding of renewal and, rebirth in the true way. Also interesting that you talk about one of the cultural initiations in indigenous cultures, even in the Hebrew, with bar and bat mitzvahs around the age of 13. That's just when the astral body comes online. And if you don't have some kind of grounding, something that initiation gives you, where you get a sense of your own power, that's the wildness of the teenage years, right?
Is that so?
And maybe you can say that's what happened. Our son Solana left before he got his initiation, and he's had to, like, the way that our galaxy has gone and being in constant wars, that we've lost Tiamat, we've lost Mars, we've lost Venus as far as viable life living on it, which once did in a different sense, and we lost Maldek. And that's when our son just kind of cried out and said, oh my God. Like, he realized, oh my God, I'm not just standing here and I'm not doing a great job at this, So
Wow.
anyway.
I mean, there's a great book just talking about that by Malidome Some, who wrote about how he missed his initiation from his tribe in Burkina Faso. I can never remember the exact name of the book, but it's called something like Of Fire and Earth. I can never remember the
I
exact name, but a
remember
really
hearing
amazing.
about that.
Yeah, it's a really amazing account of him being taken as a child, I think around the age of 8, by Jesuit missionaries and put into a Jesuit missionary school, you can say. And at some point, he realizes that something is wrong, and I think he runs away at the age of like 16 or something, and he runs back to his tribe, and all of his fellow brothers and sisters, who are sort of 2 or 3 years young, or his fellow male counterparts, really, a couple of years younger than him, they're about to go through their initiation at the age of 13. But it was recognized by the tribal leaders that if you go past a certain point, even up to the age that I think Malidoma was at that age, it's like it becomes a lot harder because you've already started to get entrenched into certain patterns, but at the age of, I think it was about 13, to be honest, you've got this kind of flexibility that allows you to be much more open to the initiations. And the initiations are profound. If you read the book, I mean, they sound totally far out, even for someone like myself who's pretty into far out. But it's a really, really amazing book. And I think it really highlights and illustrates the importance of initiations, particularly at that age in life. And I'd never heard that information about that's when our astral body comes online. I mean, I would have some questions around that, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. But I think,
yeah, I may say it too loosely, and I could look it up again to get the better wording. But no, every 7 years, we've got a different aspect of our body being developed.
Is that so? Wow.
Yeah. So if you think of 13's the standard initiation, right between 14th, you've got, anyway, I can bring that to another show. A lot of people know that. It's pretty commonly like kind of followed in Gene Key's logic and anyway, but I'm not prepared to speak about it intelligently. I just know it happens.
We've gone slightly off course, and my apologies for that, but these are all interesting aspects, I think, of what we're looking at and how we got to this place. Yeah, how we got here. So, okay, so we're into Alpha Hydri, a female serpent star.
Well, and I think this is fascinating. So, right, we talk about the male serpent ultimate initiation on Achemar, and then Alpha Hydri comes in at 1228 of Pisces. The Hydras constellation was only first sighted and named in the 1600s. And it's actually the beginning of the return of the goddess, just, very slowly starting to come in then. But Alpha Hydri, there's the beta and alpha. Beta is actually out. We'll see it when I look at an overall code with you later. But this is beginning, this star, the whole consciousness, right? Because these stars are full of information. They're worlds, they're bodies. Your soul aspect is up there doing things, learning things. Anyway, Alpha Hydri is beginning to bring back the awareness of the goddess into the world. And it's the stellar ray that admits the knowledge about the goddess's consciousness, about her dreams, her visions, the female identity of the goddess, her voice, and her message to the world. So if you've got father, son, or Dharma ego sitting down, or developed yang and undeveloped yang sitting down, kind of getting together, here's this feminine force coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to be part of this. I am part of this. There's an initiation. I'm part of this. And then the next point is the Ankaa star, which is in the Phoenix constellation. That's the bird nation. Remember, I said the different bird nation constellations will show us different aspects of our consciousness on the path of development. I've talked about that in another show, so I won't get into it now. But basically, the Ankaa is the third eye of the Phoenix, and it's when that feeling a lot of us have on Earth now anyway too. We're just traveling through this dark corridor, like there's what's going on? When's this going to lift? So where the planet or the house is irrelevant now because we're looking at the globe, and it's different in every place. But the planet, we're talking about Saturn and Mars. Ankaa is on. Well, at this point, we're talking about Saturn, but Mars is going to be joining in a few days. Show us the areas of our lives where the cycles of death and rebirth have to happen, where we have the motivations inside those planets. So what I'm going to say is the motivation here is Saturn saying, son, I know it looks grim, and there is light. Ankaa is all about there is light at the end of the tunnel, but you've got to completely let yourself die, and you have to know and trust that there's a rebirth process. Ankaa is it's a stellar world where it's the sign of a great survivor soul. You've probably gotten up a million times through different playouts of your consciousness in different incarnations, or however it works. But so we literally are being told that we need to, we've got this initiation, but we're being told we need to literally die to be reborn. Or let's say this masculine aspect that doesn't really know itself has to give up maybe its egoic conceptions of itself to move into something bigger, to find the light at the end of the tunnel. And that what we need to master is that death leads to rebirth. It needs to new life. And that's what I was saying. It's this kind of initiation that those parts of ourselves that we want to be mad at, or, you know, those rogue elements in creation, they have not been willing or able to take these initiations. And that's why they're so contorted and distorted. Okay, this is something really beautiful. The Hydras constellation, we're in our way here. The Hydras constellation comes up, and you remember I showed you the Eridanus River. Achemar is at the end of it. This is the Alpha Hydri. This is a motif that Bay and Ankaa saw when they were told about the Hydras constellation in the 2014. That was the year of the male and female serpent, when those energies came into our collective consciousness to start waking up things. And so they've been learning about new stars all along since the first journeys to Antares in 2005 and 6. And they just keep after adding this, because as our consciousness opens, our unconscious sees new things, just like when we saw Chiron in 1977. We have the ability to see new aspects of our story. It's like it's coming up. The shadow is coming up to be turned into a gift. But what they saw was this beautiful motif that the celestial, that the Kundalini serpent in the Hydras was gently rising in through the exit gate of the Eridanus River, because it was going towards Achemar to meet the male serpent pathway of initiation, and bringing like its tender reborn voice of the goddess, moving toward the male who's now ready to be born through this initiation to a new enlightened life. And so the goddess is like you just basically said it, Davyd, she can go forth, but the male has to be ready in his own enlightened way to meet this energy.
So really, Leslie, it had to happen this way. I mean, the goddess had to come back in order that the masculine could be healed. It seems to me that was the process that we've been in, and is still unfolding. But it's essential that it happens that way. Otherwise, the male cannot receive what is necessary for the initiation to be complete somehow.
Yeah, and really needing, I mean, God bless the male in a way. Think of being how alone in a way, expected to be strong and Marsy and always perfect and take care of this and take care of that. And, really not given mothering energy or true complementary hierogamus. We just haven't had that in our, I mean, both sides have been wounded is what it's needs to be recognized. Yeah. So what we're saying that there's this complementary essence between the two that needs to be recognized, that can be. I mean, this is what the stellar rays are telling us, right? So this is so beautiful. Here's Ankaa. This is the third eye of the phoenix. Here's Achemar coming out of the Eridanus River. Here's Alpha Hydri coming up on the Hydras to meet it. Here's the phoenix watching over the process. So basically what Bay and Ankaa said at that point when they saw it, it's like this beautiful moment being witnessed by the celestial phoenix, supporting this mystery of rebirth. So what I'm suggesting is we're in this kind of tunnel, and I'm suggesting even this is an aspect of somehow of what's coming up or going to come through with this eclipse, that there's going to be a new kind of energy to go towards this. Because what we're looking at here with rebirth is a guiding principle can be the notion of union and the creation of a new physical and spiritual unity instead of a fight. And that can mean the redemption and ascension of these forces, really the masculine and feminine forces broadly, but really any force. So here's something I'm just going to say. This is a quote from the book because why know these stellar forces? Because when we can call something by its name, we become capable of having control over it, to understand it, to accept it. So that's when like I just told you, oh, I know these stars. Let me tell you about them. Because when we get to know the stellar powers together with their qualities, the harmonizing and recoding forces that are sent by the celestials through these stars get a meaning to us. And basically, that's our own self. That's our light body. They open a memory or a revelation in our consciousness and in our spiritual power that's related to all that, that can come to work from then on. And when we go into an ascension process, essentially lifting into higher aspects of being, it's like our light bodies, which are exemplified by these stars, are going to be, we're going to be reaching for them. It's going to be reaching for us. But if we don't recognize it, like Bay and Ankaa have a part in the beginning, they say, you know, you can have the most glorious allies and forces in front of you, but if you don't recognize them, if you don't see them, if you don't take their hands, you know, you can't be pulled up in the process. So I'm also suggesting that, I know we're coming more into stellar consciousness now in general. The response that I've talked to a lot of different people, this is a big, people are getting it much quicker. We're ready to do this. And I just want to tell you on that vein, so this is a page from the Antares code. Antares being, that's the 7th dimensional star where these Akashic records of the Milky Way galaxy are held in sound frequencies. They've been translated into myth. But this is the stars coming through these planets on tomorrow, April 8th. But no, it means nothing if you don't know the code. It's a code. Once you start feeling and learning and understanding, it's like, oh, and the best thing about a code is not necessarily mental. It's a little bit mental, but it's also, it wakes up something. But I'm just going to take you through a little quick walk of some things. Okay, Jupiter, Uranus, we know they're going to come together soon. Uranus has been carrying this star Rukbat for months. Suddenly it's gone out of orb of it, but Jupiter is carrying it. Rukbat is a Pegasus star. That's the messenger part of us who hears the living news from the divine mind and is asked to kind of take it as a seed of light into the darkness and plant that divine mind as a seed of light. Rukbat is the message of endings. It's a cycle is coming to an end. Okay. We can go to Pluto, which we looked at the Pluto Cazimi, and we looked at some of these stars are still on it. But now Pluto has Beta Hydri. It has the other feminine star. I was hypothesizing, you know, our sun wants to move into the rebirth aspect of Pluto. That's why he's revisiting kind of in a hellish way all these, with these Cazimis and the Chiron Cazimi, and even when the Jupiter comes up. Because what is Jupiter in our, it's really the piece of our sun's psyche that's his soul or his essence. That's why it's so expansive. You could say Mars is kind of like his ego, but Jupiter is like, that's his soul. But that expansive nature, which he didn't understand because he left his path, he's going to have to come to grips with it on the Jupiter Cazimi in May 18th. He'll be looking at Algol, his Pleiadian family. There's a whole bunch of stars on it. But at any rate, so Jupiter, so it's interesting because Jupiter and Uranus are going to get together on the 20th. And I won't even go there because that's a whole other really interesting show. What Uranus is his sister Merope. And she was another totally Aquarian kid, man. They were in it together. So if you learn about Merope, you know,
isn't Merope one of the Pleiadian stars, Leslie?
Yes, it's a Pleiadian star. That's why it's his sister. Because remember, he's really set up his inner psyche, or even our psyche, right, is patterned after these memories of the Pleiadian home that he comes from, his family. But I'll just tell you a few other things, and then we can sort of finish up for today. Pluto, I was saying, now has the other star of the Hydras constellation, the Beta Hydras. So Pluto has the return of the goddess coming in, has a unicorn star, Algeti. Unicorn is the creative part of ourself. We dream or have intentions that we put out so that they act like magnets for energy to form around, so that dreams get created or manifest. When we first came into consciousness, Algeti is like a very intense point of consciousness star. We literally, just as new beings, got to stand on it, and every possibility in creation is on Algeti. And so our being, like almost magnetically, picked its destiny. Like, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? So Algeti coming back in a code always means it's like a revisiting of this chance to step on this point of consciousness and identify with who you are. It can be a whole kind of wish to create a new postulate, basically, like especially with all the experiencing you had. It's like, okay, I want to create a tabula rosa. I want to stand on Algeti again. I want to feel what magnetizes me. I want my destiny to mature. But that's on Pluto. So Pluto is starting to get these little like flickers, right, of rebirth really in it, I would say. You could look at Juno, which is in its highest sense as an asteroid, could be represented as the feminine to the masculine. It's, in a lower mundane sense, the good wife, she gets betrayed, but in a higher sense, no, it's really like the feminine, like Mary Magdalene was to Jesus, the Hieros Gamos. What is she carrying? She's carrying the star that is all about the initiation into mercy for the dragons. And the bear star, which is, the bears have to do with teaching the qualities or being the qualities of Christ consciousness, which is, fifth, sixth, seventh dimensional consciousness. This is a star from the Big Dipper, Alioth, which is all about forgiveness. So you have the feminine going, let's have mercy, let's forgive. And so like I could go through this whole thing and kind of give you a stellar story. I'm going to stop right here. This is just an example.
Well, just leave the screen up for a second, Leslie, because there's quite a few things you said there that I just would like to draw some further attention to before we do come into the wrap up for this incredibly fascinating addendum that you've put together here. And there are a couple of things in my awareness. So it's interesting that Pluto has now moved sufficiently forwards enough to touch into Algedi and start bringing that unicorn nation online. If I've understood this correctly, because I can't see the full coding at the side, Algedi stands at 4 degrees and 12 minutes currently of Aquarius. Is that what that's saying there in the right-hand column? Is that the actual position of the star?
Yeah, Pluto's at Aquarius 158, I believe. And then this is the star. And then there's the star orbs will go from anywhere from 2.5 till 4, even some of them 5, I think. And there's a
Right. So
yeah.
Yeah, so basically it's only just coming into probably orb just recently. Now, I was just, while you were talking, I was just trying to find when Pluto actually goes retrograde, and I don't have the date exactly to hand, but it seems like we're going to have this little window, possibly for a month or so. I'd have to check the dates exactly, where we're going to have access to that unicorn creative energy with Pluto in Aquarius before it starts to backslide again into ultimately a Capricorn towards the end of the year. But what's also interesting is that, because it's going to be roughly the same in a few weeks' time, is that Neptune is currently around the 28th degree of Pisces. It's moving very slowly, of course, which is where you have Shiat. Now, we're going to hold that piece of information over for another little piece that we're going to do. But Mars will ultimately, once it moves beyond its daddy story here in the middle of Pisces, is going to encounter Neptune in that roughly that position. I think the degrees are a little at the minute. It's a little different, but that's not going to happen for a couple of weeks yet. And then Mars conjuncts Neptune at 2852 of Pisces on the 28th of April. So I kind of think that we're probably going to save that for a little addendum show in a little while down the road. But that, I feel, is where Mars finishes this kind of initiation piece before it enters into Aries, which I think is fascinating. But also what's really interesting for me, and it's not shown on this chart, is that we have a full moon in Scorpio around 4 degrees coming up also in the next week or so. Let me just pull open my diary here. So it's coming up, I think, on the 23rd of April. And that's when we start to hit some of the crew constellation, the Christ consciousness energy. And the moon, over a period of 2 or 3 days, will illuminate, first of all, on the full moon, the first couple of those stars. And then I think within 2 or 3 days, which would mirror almost the time that Christ spends in the tomb, in the rock cut tomb on the Easter weekend. And then it hits the second part of the crew constellation, which will give us the full 4 stars of the crew constellation with the sacred Christ consciousness temple in the middle, which of course is really the culmination of the energy of Jesus and Mary Magdalene as the masculine and the feminine. So I feel like we're on this very, very profound, but actually quite accelerated journey towards these points that are coming very, very quickly with all of these energies conjoining to show us how the ultimate place that we're coming to is the conjoining of the masculine and feminine energies within ourselves, whether we're masculine or feminine in this incarnation. And from that place, then we can start to step out and say, how do I take that energy to meet another being who's also done that initiation? And they've got those energies balanced. And I think once we start to see that ripple out across the planet en masse, then we're starting to see the onset of the Aquarian age and what I believe is New Earth and the 5D consciousness, which is really the balancing of those energies. So there's more to this story, and we don't want to give too much away because otherwise we're going to be giving too many spoiler alerts. But what do you think, Leslie? Does that make sense?
We always go long, but yes, and but I do want to add to, that's true. The crew constellation is the 4 principles of creation. So we'll get to that. But when you talk about Mars going through Pisces, he's going to hit a whole bunch of Pegasus stars, some very healing stars. There's some very deep, very loving healing coming, which has a whole story unto itself, which we'll save. But
I noticed you didn't put Hammam in there because that's a star that I know very well and currently working with.
It's going to come on to healing. He'll be there. Yeah. It'll happen soon, but we're not there yet because I ran this on the 8th right. Okay. No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, literally, you know, within orb, these things are going to be coming through these planetary lenses, which in our framework, I'm saying, okay, let's look at this as a piece of our psyche. Well, people do that in astrology anyway, but inside the bigger cosmic history story of our sun and what that means. So,
well, you know, this is where I also just want to bring in some of the other elements that we both know about and work with, which is some of the mind time. And, you know, the Jupiter and Uranus conjunction is actually on the day of the final day of the wave spell that starts with the eclipse. And the following one, which starts on April the 21st, is of the blue night, which is really about dreaming. And I kind of feel that what we're being offered here over these next couple of weeks is a very accelerated path of healing with Mars, like you've just said, with all of these Pegasus stars, which is cleansing out the pain and the deep wounding that we've suffered from these last missions that some of us have been through, or maybe we've all been through, depending on what our soul has set up for us. But there's this really profound sense that we're heading towards something really, really beautiful very, very quickly. And I kind of feel that this eclipse is offering us this portal opportunity to call that in and say, hey, this is being laid out in the cosmic codes. It's all here if we choose. We don't have to choose it. We can also fall into the bait and Katos trap and still be in the Hall of Mirrors and bouncing around and whatever else we want to do with that. But I would suggest that most of us who are still in the game at this point have kind of had enough. It's like, nah, I think I want to let go of that mission, that fall, that descent. I'm kind of tired of the pain world. I'm tired of the Hall of Mirrors. And actually, I'm calling in something different. I'm calling in something that's much more holistic, much more of the goddess, of the creative energy, but also of my own divine masculine energy, where I can be strong and I can be sovereign without it necessarily having to be at the detriment of somebody else, which unfortunately is how the sort of the yang energy of the last 2,000 to 4,000 years has somewhat happened and also been perceived and allowed to happen. So I do sense this very, very rapid, potentially rebalancing of these energies. And what you're doing here, I think, is showing our audience and listeners the potentiality of what is actually available to us with this eclipse. So, you know, don't switch off, everybody. Like, this is an amazing
No,
opportunity, an
no.
invitation that
Yeah,
we can accept, right? I think, Leslie.
right. Well, and it's still, it's still going to be, it's not going to probably be kumbaya immediately. It's the ride. It's the ride, but the ride is, that's why I like checking in with the stars, because they're so accurate about like, oh, okay, all right, there's this part, there's this part. And then we're actually informed in a sense by the story. And what you just said about let's get out of bait and Katos, well, that is the plan as far as the divine mind is concerned. That is the plan as far as our highest intention. So are we going to actualize that?
Well, this I think is the critical point, right, Leslie? And without wanting to bang the drum too much, it's just like, well, do we choose to engage with the energy that's available right now? Do we say, hey, I'm inviting all of this in, I'm calling it in with this eclipse through this portal from deep space, I'm calling in all of these energies? Or do you just switch off and carry on watching your Netflix series, maybe take another holiday, go down the pub for a bit and say, oh, well, you know, maybe it's all just a big load of BS and I'm not really into it. Well, okay, fine. You're still going to be in the Hall of Mirrors. So this is where I see the bifurcation and the choice point. It's like me, myself, and I'm choosing to engage with all the material that you've been sharing with us and many other sources that have illuminated my inner space and inspired me to say, hey, I think I want something different for myself right now. It just so turns out that my astrology and my code support that, but I can't be the only one like that. There must be millions of us on the
No, I
planet
think we
who've
all
got
came
lots
in,
of
we did.
potentiality of change,
Yeah,
right?
especially now. We're in,
Right.
we are in a timeline, especially from 87. And if we incarnated at this point, we have
Right.
some aspect of our blueprint saying that we are willing to pull out all our karmas and bring them up and resolve them. Because we're not going to get this cosmic rearrangement that literally is galactically planned. It has nothing to do with us little humans, although us little humans are going to be real stars of the show because everybody's watching, like if we can pull this
Right.
off.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, and
Wow.
it has to do a lot with, there was a quote I forgot to read, I put on the slide when I had the energy dynamics between Mars and Saturn. It was something about, we didn't come to this life to satisfy the ego, we came to this life to do what our soul wants us to do, basically. And that's the distinction. And I think things
Yeah.
happen when you're not listening. Your soul makes things happen. I don't mean that in a dire way. I just mean if you really are committed to your soul, you're suddenly going to go left or right and go, what? But then you're going to realize, oh, wait a minute. And I think we're all starting, many of us are starting to feel that higher soul impulse, and the voice is clearer from it.
Right,
So
and I'm sat here shuffling around, and apologies for anyone who's seen me moving around. It's because I'm trying to sit with my feet up, and my whole accident story, we can say, is very much me accepting and surrendering to divine fate, really, and it playing out in a certain way, but also understanding that if I didn't accept that, it was going to go a different direction. And painful as this physical situation is, it will pass, and it will pass easier for me personally by engaging with what is the higher dimensional story that wants to play out if I'm willing to let it. And I think that that's where my ego has to get out of the way, and I have to go through an ego death, as I think we all do at some point, if probably not now, maybe, and to let go of the identities, the victim being one of the biggest ones in all of this for many of us.
that's
And
bad. We can't move on if we stay victim. We just cannot.
and it's no good feeling justified in being a victim, as I have done for quite a large part of my life, and feeling very much like, hey, somebody's messing me up, and somehow they were. But also there was something that was deeply hidden in my karmic soul journey that needed to be looked at. And so when I finally surrendered to that process very recently, this happened immediately. And I'm like, well, okay, that seems kind of harsh. But at the same time, it's just like, well, no, Davyd, like look at the bigger picture. And thanks to you, Leslie, and Stellar Nations and a whole bunch of other material, I've been able to make sense of it. And so there is nothing bad. There's just me accepting and surrendering my ego self, which includes victimhood, to my divine self and saying, hey, actually, I think it's going to be a lot more fun and a lot more beautiful if I give this over to my soul now, who wants to heal, rather than monkey mind down here who wants to control everything and say, no, we don't want an accident. We don't want the pain. We're going to try and control it in a different way, which is still pulling me with free will away from my divine destiny. So my choice, I could do that. But the things that I really wanted at a soul level would not have come to pass. And that's what my plant allies showed me in the run up to the accident. And so I'm like, wow, okay. a tough lesson, maybe, and a painful one, but it's not going to be forever. And whilst we have this wonderful material to engage with, what I would like to suggest and invite other people who may be experiencing physical, emotional, mental pain, is that there is a route out of all of this. But we have to choose to surrender to our higher selves, to divine forces, and say, hey, maybe I don't know what it's all about. Maybe my ego needs to get out of the way here and say, stop trying to control everything and surrender to a process. And even if it can seem overwhelming at times, which for many beings on the planet right now, I'm sure it does, it's like when we actually finally surrender, something magical can happen because we're giving ourselves over to our higher self and creative spirit. And I know it seems like a tough gig. It's like, oh, but why should I trust him? He's let me down, apparently, so many times before. But actually, that's not true. It's
Oh, but
just we've got all this mishmash of stories going on that we haven't really sorted through and made sense of.
see, what you just did is summarized the initiation on Anaar, where you have to pierce your own darkness with your
Right.
light. You know, you have to basically eat and integrate your shadow. You have to use your shadow as fuel for your light.
Right.
Because
And I certainly don't want to put people off doing that by saying, hey, you have to fall off a ledge and break your feet to do that, because that just happens to be my route out that I
that
had
was
to
your
go.
path. You timed
That
it
was my
very
path.
well, because now you're back, you're ready, you got some realizations, you're ready for the eclipse.
Well,
So
maybe just on that note, I'm going to share a little bit more because it seems pertinent at this point. It's like I did do a series of, I can say, sacred fungi initiations in the run up to doing the oak immersion. And I was shown a series of timelines that weren't going to work out the way that my soul wanted, in the way that I'd envisioned for my soul, for my partner, for my tribe, for the planet. And I said, Davyd, you don't have to do any of these things, but we're offering you a route here where something can play out the way that you want. There was only 2 or 3 out of like maybe 20, 30 different timelines. And I'm now understanding they said, okay, in the moment that I agreed to do that, literally 48 hours before the accident, so-called, happened, they said, okay, you've agreed, Davyd, that's great. We're on board. You've done all the work that we asked you to do. Now we're going to let it happen. And so they took the easiest and quickest opportunity, which was on a day that didn't exist, where I had no protection. All of the things that normally would have stopped this from happening weren't there. And so, yes, I can say that there were some nefarious forces that somewhat pushed me off the ledge, but my crew let that happen too, which is part of the polarity of duality. But in that moment, I allowed divine forces to take control because, like you said, the timing is so precise. I can now benefit from all of these wonderful energies that are at work. And so all I had to do was step up and be brave. And I remember sitting under the tree when the deal was put to me, and they said, Davyd, this could hurt. It could be painful. I'm like, how painful can it be? If that's the ultimate destination that looks so beautiful, surely anything has to be worth enduring shortly in a small space of time to get to that place. And they're like, great, we're all on board then. And then 48 hours later, I'm falling off a ledge and shattering my feet. And I'm
yeah,
like,
but
oh my
you
gosh.
did a really good landing.
Well, I've come to realize that's why I put a tattoo of the Garuda bird on my right leg, because he's actually a bird that deals with the Nagas, which are actually the fallen serpents. And he, in many traditions, is called the king of the birds. And I have lots of bird nation stars in my chart. So somehow I put wings on my right leg, which didn't get so badly damaged, so that I would somehow not fall down and have a mess, but somehow come down on a landing that I can only say is so utterly precise that it's mind-blowing that, my legs didn't break, my knees didn't break, nothing broke apart from my 2 heels. And as it turns out, my left heel needed to break for another reason that I'll share in another podcast at another time, but is also connected to all of the divine destinies encoded in my stellar nations. I'm just like, the more I look at it, the more fractal and quantum and amazing it becomes. And all I had to do was get out of the way of it and say, hey, as long as Davyd can sit back and get his monkey mind out of the way, something really amazing can happen here. And yes, in my 3D body, it definitely does hurt right now. I'm not going to lie, but it's like, it's only temporary. It's only for a few weeks or maybe a few months at the most. And then I'll be walking again. And by that point, I will have completed these initiations, hopefully, because I don't really have any choice. I have to sit still now for the next 2 months and just engage with whatever is going to happen. So I share this as hopefully something inspiring for people to understand that sometimes something seemingly bad can happen. But if we really get out of the way of our egoic mind, we can see that there is no bad. There's just beauty everywhere. And it just depends how much we want to resist or surrender to that process.
Yeah, and that's coming into the Christ consciousness, which is hard because Jesus and all that Christianity has been so maligned. That is so well covered in our cosmic history, where that well got distorted. But it's hard. We still contracted that idea, but the idea is, yeah, once you get into that consciousness, everything looks different because it is, because you're just in a different, you're reading things differently and you're attracting things differently. And that's part of our function. The 3 stars revealed in 2020, one of them was the collective consciousness could see going to the 5th dimension, getting a second, completing your divine destiny in a sense, getting aligned back with it, becoming aware enough of the 5th dimension to get a second seal of destiny and become a living bridge back to the 3rd dimension. And that's actually an early Scorpio star. That's called Via Placidus. So,
I think I have that one on my.
So you do.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, let's, do you want to finish I think you found the slide with the quote and then we can
I
perhaps
have
wrap
one
things
more quick quote. I really like this quote. I want to leave us with this. And my controls are blocking the first sentence, but this is from Jose Arguelles, the Mayan Factor. I like this book, Path Beyond Technology, because he's really pointing out how we as humans are the technology. And he's saying that the warriors of the sun are ironically, right? And not ironically, but it fits right in with what we've talked about with the sun's journey, us as part of the sun. The warriors of the sun are those humans who fully realize the dream light body within the physical and understanding the circuitry of the human organism, use the light body to navigate the electromagnetic waters, which we call the universe. For this to occur, all we need to do is reverse our view. It's not the physical body that is primary, but the light body. And that's why I really like knowing my stars, because I feel I have a coherent grasp of my light body, and I can be both. I mean, I'm still learning. I'm not like, we're all, but we have a way to get there. It's a little more mapped out.
Well,
So
as
that's all
eternal
I want
beings,
to say.
we have eternity to play this game. So there really isn't an awful lot of rush,
Yeah.
to be honest, which I think is often what.
I'm going to put this on for a minute so we can just go, oh, let's go. Okay. Now we can stop sharing. And I think, I don't know how long we took. We always talk a long time.
Well, we said an hour, but I think we did our usual hour and 20 something. But, hopefully our audience finds this material as fascinating as we do. And hopefully you're in the dark now and being
At least we're
illuminated. Your stars are
entertained.
being. Right. Hopefully our audience finds this as interesting as we do, because I think what you put there in the final quote, Leslie, is really, really important. It's like the indigenous people say that this reality is the psychedelic experience. The real reality is the light body reality. And I think that that's really beautiful, because, to be honest, this experience is crazy, right? The more I've sat with it over the last 10 years, the more I'm like, this is absurd. All of it's bizarre, beyond bizarre. And so as a Skywalker, my natural tendency is to go back to what felt more comfortable, which is my light body. So maybe I have an advantage in this work, having already been quite multidimensional most of my life and having more understanding of the 5D, but still being deeply wounded somehow here in the 3D and having to unravel that by how to say, traversing the different realms. So as we move into the next segment of this unfolding of 2024, but really the great unfolding of what is happening, I know that we plan to do some more shows. I think that what Mars is going to reveal in Pisces in the coming weeks is also an incredible part of the story. So as much as our audience can keep up with us, I feel like me and you are probably going to be doing more regular pieces in the coming days and weeks, because we see that there is a story that wants to map itself out here. And I was just looking over my notes from a more astrological point of view, again, largely from Molly's wonderful video, and it says the same thing. It's saying the same thing. This is a bigger part of a spiritual journey. We're letting go of who we are. We're making karmic choices and understanding the consequences of those things that we've done before. We're basically changing our face. We're going through death and rebirth, and we're also bringing attention to our own insecurities and fears, and that is part of also the ego, and having to let go of those things and saying they're not really real, they're contrived experiences. And if we can let go of them, then if I'm free of fear and I'm free of pain, what kind of being am I? I don't think I'm Davyd anymore, because that's largely been his identity most of this incarnation. And I can't speak for anybody else, but many of us out there have all had similar things that we've had to deal with in this incarnation. So I think this is an opportunity, Leslie, for us to dare to dream of us in our truest soulful experience in our entirety, of both an unfragmented goddess and also a sovereign masculine energy that is not trying to push its ego onto other beings. And wow, what does that look
There's
like?
your Pluto declaration of El Getty. I want a tabula
Right.
rosa and I'm making a new postulate.
Right, exactly. And so the truth is, it's already all within us. And I think that's the most amazing
That's the
thing
point.
too. And all we have to
It's
do
all
is
within us.
accept it.
Yeah.
It's all within us.
The stars are literally mapped inside of us. You know, in Hungary, they have
It's
a whole bodywork system, astrocosmogenesis, where they've tracked where these are. So then when they work on you, like if you have a block in something, you know, it may come up in a certain star, but you know from the stellar story and you know from the nation, it's like, oh, what that is. And anyway, it's just
it's
coherent. It gives us a way to, I've always said about this, you can be grounded in boundlessness. It doesn't put you in a box, but yet you're very grounded.
right. And you know, as a final thought, I just want to share this. We have many people now watching the Cosmic History Codes, and if you're coming to this for the first time and not really sure about stellar nations, myself and Leslie and Bella put together a wonderful pathway that's mapped out on quantumplanet.world, and you can get your Antares code, and you can dive into this material at any point. The pathway has been laid out. There's a whole wealth of material channeled by Bayon and Eco, and of course, Leslie, you've also just translated one of the books, right, which I think is really
I am
important.
so excited. There's another 800-page book. It's literally done. I'm just doing, Bay and I just doing like kind of a final read through to catch things. But it's our cosmic history. We're looking at descriptions of all the Pleiadian stars. We're looking at the Andromeda system. We're looking at Orion and everything that happened there. We're looking at Sirius. We're looking at Atlantis and all kinds of things from Lemuria. They just had a rememory of the Island of the Crystals, which worked next to their Island of the Stars, which happened with the emergence of the Slovakian. Like there's 1,000 people reading it in Slovakia now. And three of their books were put into Slovakian like this. And they're close enough that they keep coming to the temple and taking courses. There's just a very big reemergence of stellar consciousness, because we're so deep in the photon belt. It is so much information. Also, on the traditional Kabbalah shows 10 orbs of knowledge, but when Bay and Ankaa were attenuating into our Taurus and saw that through the male serpent nation, there's actually 12. And the missing ones were the awareness of the stellar consciousness and then a different kind of awareness of the divine. And we're waking up to that. I mean, that's what we're meant to.
Exactly, and I think that that's the really beautiful thing about all of this. And as I think we've realized, Leslie, from doing this course and laying it out and seeing some of our own tribe members move across, is that you only really come to this material when you're ready to receive it, because otherwise it is overwhelming and it can seem abstract. But once you're in a place to receive, I think that it just starts, well, speaking from experience, it just turned on light bulb after light bulb and activated my DNA in a way that I've been living with ever since. And when we put that alongside what Bella's been doing, of course, Bella also has her translation of volumes 1 and 2 of the Stellar Nations family coming out also very, very soon. So there's a lot of activity in the Stellar Nations world. And, you know, when we put the Mayan stuff alongside that, the two are so intrinsically linked. And, you know, again, the body stuff, each of the different glyphs has a representation on the body. And mine, surprisingly, number 13 is linked to my left ankle. So I'm like, wow, it's like, it's all there. And I think that's what makes this so beautiful, is that there's coherency. And that's often when I get a little kind of, I say, maybe even triggered by material that comes out that doesn't sound coherent. It sounds fluffy, and it's like somebody read it somewhere else and they put it together, and it's like, no, it doesn't feel coherent. But this material from day one has always felt coherent. And even more when I put it with the astrology and I put it with Mayan time, it's like, wow, the whole thing just fits together like a jigsaw puzzle that feels holistic. And I think that that's the most important thing. So I'll put all of the different links in the show notes for those of you that want to get it more into Stellar Nations. You can also reach out if you're in the Americas to Leslie, who has some of the books. The course is also there on quantumplanet.world. And of course, you can reach out to the ladies in Hungary and get your Antares code, which I highly recommend. If you don't have that already and you're watching these shows, it's going to make these shows so much more deep and rich for you. So please do check those out. And also, please do also check out Bella's wonderful 6-part course on Mayan Time and Magic. We just did a wonderful part 3 commentary with Leslie, looking at some of the galactic aspects in relation to the Pleiades, and in particular to the star Maya, which is where we perceive that our ancestral time-traveling Mayan kinsfolk come from. So this is where all of these things start to get really, really juicy and super exciting. And we're just inviting all of you who feel called to understand your cosmic self and the fractal nature of reality and time to step up into that space and start leaving behind the more 3D-centric old paradigm, because that is what is now collapsing and breaking down. And I think that that is what this eclipse is all about. So, Leslie, do you have a final word for today, or are we
No, just
at the
thank you. I
point?
think we brought out what we wanted to. I will say there's been an increase of interest, which I'm really happy about. And there's a necessity for coordination and people to get together. And there's incredible projects that can happen, like, plays or education for children. Anyway, I've always considered myself like just an ambassador of the Stellar Nations, and I've written blogs and stuff, but I am actually creating a website now for the purpose of having a place for discussion and live calls, and also projects to come together. I mean, shouldn't talk about it because it's a month away, but I'm really saying it in the vein of, yeah, this is good. Stellar consciousness is increasing. And the celestials told Bay and Anakaa way at the beginning, they just saw the line of humans who in their own timing would, they're coded to wake up to it. And so if you feel attracted, you're great. And if you don't, that's fine too. We have our resonances. It's all about resonance.
Right, and I think that to finish with something that probably many of our audience will already understand, this is dandelion. Dandelion timing is everything is always perfect, and in every moment there is only the divine at work. And in the moment that we feel called to investigate this, it's the perfect moment. And if it doesn't call to you right now, then it's obviously not the right moment. So everything is always perfect, as Dandelion likes to say. And on that wonderful note, Leslie, thank you so much for taking extra time out this week to assist in putting this together. I think, again, you've delivered a wonderful insight into the energies that are at work right now. And as I said, I think it's an invitation to those of us who are feeling the call to step into the place of initiation and work with these energies, or not. It's up to you. But for me, I'm super excited. I think that this is a really important moment.
Not to mix it up. You don't have to work with the stellar nations to work with these energies. We're talking more broadly about the energies of this whole eclipse and the forward movement of evolution. And we're all going to have our own ways to participate. But hopefully what we just said kind of illuminates. I think it goes back to that one of the first slides. We live in this vastly intelligent, coherent universe, and we are part of that, and we can start to know ourselves in that way. So with that kind of intelligence and coherence. So
right, good point. And as I said, looking at the astrological notes, the two things are the same. Molly channeled a wonderful piece, which I definitely recommend on her channel, and it's exactly the same information, but she was doing that through the normal astrology, and we've looked at the cosmology of it, and it's telling us the same story, which I think is mind-blowing. So depending on where you put your focus, you will receive the information you need, and all you need to do is invite it into your awareness and let it work with you, because that is really what your soul wants to happen. And that I think is really up to each and every one of us, and that's what makes this world so exciting, is that there's just a plethora of different possibilities. So with that in mind, thank you.
You're standing on
Getty, right?
What do you want to do? All right, let's hang up.
Right. Color in the picture however you want. It's your picture. Make it as beautiful as you want. So on that note, thank you, Leslie. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again. And we will see you again, I think, very, very soon for the next installment of the Cosmic History Codes and the great unfolding of the great shift that we are in. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you all again very soon. Ciao for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.